Listen, Christopher, I love this. I love the fact that you're outlining the preamble using the language of the time and helping translate it for today. I love that you're helping make this make sense to your average person. But here's the objection. What will it accomplish? Here's the premise to that. We have 400 or 300 years, basically, of the American experiment. And with that, a constitution, and with that, the preamble that is to the Constitution, and the amendments of the Bill of Rights, and so on and so forth. And yet, despite people at that time speaking the language to where we are today, that piece of paper has been so violated, so completely overstepped, so just completely ignored, that even if we had a populace understand the importance and the context of the document as it was written at the time that it was written, that even still, that wouldn't make a difference today, because we've seen how big the government has gotten. We've seen how overreaching the government has gotten. We see how tyrannical the government has gotten, that despite a populace becoming aware and understanding that there's still no way for them to actually, and pardon the expression, fight back, to stand up and do something about it. So that's the objection, Christopher. I'll let you go ahead and respond in full.
It's a great objection, and I can see the best way to overcome it is to go back to one point. The whole objective of making the guide was so that people could get results.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on The Brian Nichols Show, and thank you for joining us on, of course, another fun-filled episode. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by AMP America. Very excited to be part of the AMP America team. Folks, if you're looking for the news you need without the corporate media bias or fluff, head to ampamerica.com. Also, the Brian Nichols Show is powered by Cardio Miracle, our phenomenal studio sponsor. Folks, if you're looking for the best heart health supplement in the world, it will help lower your blood pressure, help lower your resting heart rate, improve your pump at the gym, and more. If you want to learn more about this awesome brand new ingredient, nitric oxide, that's changing the heart health supplement game by storm, stick around. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in today's episode. But first, returning to the show, we're going to talk about that preamble of the Constitution once again, but not just the preamble itself, but also a brand new book that was written talking about the importance of said preamble. And also, since the book's been out, what have been the feedback we've been hearing from said book? Returning to the Brian Nichols Show from Citizen Academy US, returning is our good friend Christopher Nesbitt. Welcome back to the Brian Nichols Show. How you been?
I've been very well, Brian. I'm delighted to be back. I'm ecstatic to be on your show one more time. So thanks for having me.
Great to have you on, Christopher. We got our morning coffee here. We're recording on a Saturday for the peek behind the curtain. I got mine. You got yours. Yeah, we're ready to go. We got the caffeine flowing. So let's start things off, Christopher. And for the folks who maybe are joining us here who didn't hear your last appearance on the show, because peek behind the curtain again, we've been growing leaps and bounds, literally tens of thousands of folks new into the audience over the past year. So Christopher, let's do them a favor. Reintroduce yourself here to the Brian Nichols Show audience. Also, your role at Citizens Academy US.
Okay, I would be glad to. So my name is Christopher Nesbitt. I'm the national spokesman of the Citizens Academy US. This program is got a single purpose to help hundreds of millions of Americans learn the preamble of the US Constitution. And that is it. That has been found to be a great problem solver. And for anybody concerned about politics or having a better society, this is an answer to many problems that is often overlooked. And what I intend to do today is just to go over why it's been so successful. We've had success stories and wins of people writing to us, streaming into our website. I'll be going over how to get onto the website, how to get a free digital download of our book, which is the Guide to Complete Understanding of the United States Constitution, which you can see right here.
Look at that. Now that's a good looking book, Christopher. And by the way, I want to just quickly call out, this book is not just another book on the Constitution. And by the way, I just want to give some context to my comment and question, or not even question, it's a comment here, is that I've seen this happen. So many folks, they get the glazed over eyes, right, Christopher? Because they're like, oh God, another historical book on the Constitution. I'm going to reread, the same amendments. I'm going to reread the same passages I've read a million times over. And yet this book is not that. This book is actually going into the purpose behind the preamble, the purpose behind the words and the context that as they were written at that time. So could you just articulate, because I think we do see right now, and this goes into my question, where the language from yesteryear, right, if we go all the way back to the 1700s to where we are today, there seems to almost be a language barrier, right? You have two different nationalities coming together and speaking different languages and Tower of Babel type of stuff. You look at what's happening right here, it seems like we're kind of same church, different pew, but it's the same country, the same group of people, just hundreds of years apart. So talk to us about the language barrier from the 1700s to today and how this book is actually helping reframe that language and helping articulate the purpose of the preamble and specifically into the Constitution.
I just got to say that's the most perfect way to segue into this whole subject. It's just awesome. Not only is there a language,
I do my homework.
Yes, indeed. Not only is there a language barrier, but there's also a time barrier. Let's go back to 1776 or earlier, and we have the founding fathers put such a premium on the importance of education, down to the point that they said that the education in one generation would determine the politics of the next. The whole point of the Citizens Academy US guide is that it was found that people want to understand the Constitution. They've tried to understand it, but they've often had trouble with it, or they've failed to understand it. Now, Brian, you might remember on our last show, I showed you the definition of liberty, which covers how there's not just freedoms, but also some restrictions that people could agree to. You remember I went over that with you?
Mm-hmm. I do.
And you, your whole reaction to that is, well, yeah, you knew that. That was clear to you that there was a difference between just freedom to do anything versus liberty, where there's freedom and agreed upon restrictions that are not suppressive. And it seems like you knew that one.
I like to think I did, at least.
Yes, I think you did. But I want you to know that on a survey of literally 500 people, out of all of them, you were the only one that understood that difference between liberty and freedom.
Well, Christopher, I've been told that I might be smarter than your average bear, but my mom told me that. So I don't know if that really holds up too much in the court of law, but I digress.
That's okay. That's okay. So what is important to know is that people's understanding of words can fall apart over time. The language barrier could be that the founding fathers meant exact things by the words in the preamble, which, by the way, when you break it down, it covers 6 purposes of the U.S. Constitution. And this guide clears up every single word of the preamble, which, interestingly enough, is in just one sentence. That's a good quiz you could ask people. How many sentences are...
What's the sentence? What's the sentence?
Well, I will get into that, but let me just set it up one more time.
Hey, folks, I want to take a moment to talk about something that has truly changed my life, and that is Cardio Miracle, our incredible studio sponsor. Now, I'll be honest, when I first heard about Cardio Miracle and their claims about improving heart health, I was skeptical. But after using it for just about 2 months, I was absolutely blown away by the results. First, my blood pressure went from being consistently around 140/90 to a much more healthier and manageable 120/80. And my resting heart rate dropped from the low 70s to the high 50s. And I couldn't believe it. But the benefits didn't stop there. I started sleeping better, and I felt more energized at the gym, and my heart felt the best it's felt in years. And it's not just me. Hundreds of you, our amazing listeners, have reached out to share your own incredible experiences with Cardio Miracle. So, what is Cardio Miracle? And how does it work? It's a carefully crafted supplement that harnesses the power of nitric oxide to support optimal heart function. So by increasing nitric oxide levels in your blood, Cardio Miracle helps relax your blood vessels, improve circulation, and it protects your heart from damage. It's like giving your heart the support it needs to function at its best. And here's the best part. We've got an exclusive offer just for you, our loyal listeners here at the Brian Nichols Show. When you head over to cardiomiracle.com and use code TBNS at checkout, you'll get an extra 15% discount on your order. Plus, with their 100% money-back guarantee, you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. So, if you're ready to take control of your heart health and experience the life-changing benefits of Cardio Miracle for yourself, just click the link in the show notes or video description. Trust me, your heart will thank you. And don't wait another day to prioritize your health. Join the tens of thousands of folks who have already discovered the Cardio Miracle difference. Head to cardiomiracle.com now and use code TBNS for 15% off your order. Your journey to a happier and healthier heart starts today. And now, let's get back to the show.
Because of how the guide works and why it's been successful, and I'll get into some of the successes in a little bit, but the way the guide works is we have people read the preamble, then they go through the guide, which has every word that's important in the preamble illustrated in the book, one word at a time, where the person, either with a partner or in a group or by himself, reads the words, identifies what it means in his own words, uses sentences and examples until the word comes alive in its original meaning, which, by the way, these meanings were all based on the Noah Webster's Dictionary of 1828. Precise meanings. So when they do enough sentences and examples and the word comes alive, they can go on to the next word. They go through the entire guide. It's not just something you read, it's something you do. And then they read the preamble again. And one for one, they say it's a different preamble. I think that is worth just reflecting on for a moment. One for one, hundreds of people saying it's a different preamble. They read it, they then looked up the words and understood them per the original meaning. And it's almost like being in a time machine, going back to what the original founding fathers meant. And I look at it like if you had a combination to a safe that had all the jewels in it, and you lost track of that exact combination, you might be able to spin the dial and talk about it. But until you do the exact combination and open that vault and see what's inside, you've missed the boat. And we want people.
Let's talk about this, because we see this right now, the implications of folks not understanding context of words as they were written hundreds of years ago and the application therein today. And I think no one needs to look further than go to our nation's capital, head to the great city that is Washington, D.C., and just sit as fly on the wall, right, of our congressional hearings, listening to even folks who sit as U.S. senators or U.S. members of the House and just completely ignorant to the words they are saying and the meaning and the context behind those words. So let me just ask you this, Christopher. When you talk to the 100 folks and the 99 of them say, yeah, I read the preamble and I had a completely different understanding of the preamble until I read this guide, what was the understanding that that group of folks had? What did they look at the preamble to actually say and represent before they understood the full context through the guide that you guys presented here?
And though I haven't investigated that one for one, I would say what they thought would be different for each person. What they thought it meant, if you surveyed them, you would find 100 different answers of what they thought it meant. Now, here's an example. Just on your show, I see libertarian podcasts that you've done. And we got into that subject just a bit in our last podcast, but I must admit, I had to look up that word libertarian and really understand what it meant. But if you went out on the street and did a survey of 100 people and asked them what that word meant, what do you think you'd find?
I'll get lots of deer in the headlight looks, Christopher. I'll get lots of deer in the headlight looks.
Yes, indeed. Similarly, like here's another example, is that a relative of mine, my niece, had a husband that I was talking to at a family gathering, and I mentioned this about the preamble, and he wasn't quite sure what I was talking about. And I mentioned our guide, and he immediately went on his phone, found our website, ordered the guide, and got it. And it was just amazing, the interest that came right up on really understanding what it meant. So whatever their understanding was, I think, faded into the distance, and now they had a clear grasp of purposes. And one other thing I want to mention is that, to me, purposes are the most important part of any document. One sentence is pretty easy bite to take compared to the entire Constitution. We're eventually going to get into teaching the whole Constitution, but this first book is dedicated to, shouldn't you understand the purposes? And do you know there's 6 purposes? I can tell you one for one, anybody I've talked to never knew there were 6 purposes to the Constitution, much less where they were. That they're all in the preamble, all in one sentence, is amazing. So I think the answer to your question is, whatever they thought it was, they were delighted to know what it really meant when it was written.
So, Christopher, let's take this a different direction than the route we've been going. This has been to the folks that maybe they had a general misunderstanding, but at least an awareness of the preamble. And this guide has helped shape a better understanding of the words and the contexts at the time that they were written. But let's go on the other side of the aisle, right? And this is not a political thing, but rather this is just elephant in the room, acknowledging where we are as a society. I look into our electorate, and heck, the folks out there who just live their lives. They don't really care about politics. They don't care about policy. They're like, I need to go to work, pay my bills, come home, feed the kids, get them ready to go to bed, and start all over again the next day, right? Those folks, and this is my anecdotal experience, Christopher, so I want to hear your reaction to this, but I have found that more often than not, when you start trying to go in and teach people who they're just complete, like I want to say they don't care. It's so not in their bandwidth to add in extra stuff to learn, right? How do we take that person who they still are a taxpayer, they are still an American citizen, right? They still have that right to vote. How do we get this information that you're presenting in the guide to the preamble, and with that, teaching folks who are actually concerned and care about this stuff? How can this be a tool to help bring some of the knowledge, bring some of the necessary context and foresight to a group of folks who, I would dare say, Christopher, they need this stuff the most, and yet they are the ones who, they're not adverse to it, but they're just numb. They're like, I don't care. I don't have the bandwidth. They should care. That's my argument. But how do we get this into their world in such a way that it's not overwhelming? It's not like we're trying to beat their head over, with a book, but rather we're trying to help. And we're showing that this is something that they should be concerned about and that there is value in understanding.
That's an excellent question. Here's exactly what I think. The people that you're describing, if they don't have an interest in learning about the purposes of the document that founded America in its original form, they're not going to be really able to do the guide and get any wins or successes out of it, because the first prerequisite of it is, why would you be interested in learning about the purposes of America as found in the U.S. Constitution? Now, maybe they might say that they don't have any problems, but maybe they're aware of people around them that have problems, and they see a lot of discussions about politics, a lot of disagreements, a lot of, one could say, verbal fighting about what is going on. So the awareness of a problem that is in some way affecting them is the first step on suddenly them seeing, oh, if this is a solution to the problem, then their interest would be there, and then they would be a candidate for doing the guide. But it's that the lack of awareness of a problem could be remedied by asking them or getting them to look at, are there any problems going on today that are bothering them about America? And I think that there would be a lot of answers that they might find if they were surveyed along that line. But more importantly, what do you think?
Well, so Christopher, I'm not going to disagree with you, but and by the way, this is why this show exists, because my show has very much taken on a meet people where they're at on the issues they care about approach. And in my humble experience, I have found that when you start to lead with the isms, right, people just turn off. But when you start to ask questions, when you start to uncover real driving pain points and problems that you can at least understand how they are problems to the person you're speaking to, right? To then be able to bring a solution to the table, or at the very least have a nuanced contextual conversation around the context that they have presented as a problem, that's more conducive, I have found, to actually having a productive conversation. Now, that is not to say that going through and having a book like the Preamble Guide to the Constitution that you guys have so very nicely and generously brought out here to the public from Citizens Academy US. But with that being said, I look at it more so of how can we take what we've learned from this book and in the understanding of problems from the people we're speaking to that maybe aren't really in this world, be able to tie them together, but do so in a non-threatening way, right? And I say non-threatening being not in our words, not in our lingo, because, and just like in my day job where I'm in the tech sector, right? If I go in and I just start throwing 3-letter acronyms at people, they're going to look at me like I have 4 heads. Even though the 3-letter acronyms represent technology that my team talks about and uses every single day, when I talk to the customer, they're like, okay, what does it do though? What's this? The IVR? What is that? Oh,
Yes.
oh, that's when they call in and they get the robot. Okay, yeah, that thing, right? It's almost like, and it's funny that I'm even going back to this full circle, Christopher, but it is the language barrier, right? We speak our language, and they're speaking their own language based in the context of the world they live in. So where do we have, I guess, some areas to find those problem points and tie it back to the preamble? Is it really back into those 6 underlying purposes of the preamble and addressing how the Constitution actually goes after some of the problems they might be seeing in their day-to-day lives?
Yes. Okay. So the answer to that is fascinating on the subject of words and misunderstood words. One example is what you just said. A person gets thrown an acronym. They have no idea what the letters mean. And so they're aware they don't know what you're talking about. And that's one example of a way something could be misunderstood. But let's say somebody hears a word and they think they know what it means, but its actual original meaning that's being used in the Constitution is something else. This is a different point that needs to be understood. I'm going to demonstrate it now, if that be all right with you, because you'll often hear when politicians speak, they talk about we the people, right? Mm-hmm. That's the first 3 words of the preamble. And so, believe it or not, the first word that is cleared up after the word preamble is cleared is the word we, which is defined as you together with the other people you're talking about, all of you. We wish you a happy birthday. Pretty simple, right? People would agree with that. Good so far?
Yep.
Okay. Now, the next word in the book is the people. Here's a quick history lesson that might be interesting for all of your listeners. And by the way, anybody listening that wants to get a free copy of the guide can go to Citizens with an S. So it's CITIZENS citizenshipacademy.com and be able to access a free download or see on the bookstore how they can order a softback or hardback. But historically, when you had countries that were run by a monarchy, you had the aristocrats and the noblemen that were way up, you could say, at the top. And then there was everybody else that was not them. And the words that were used to describe everybody that was not a nobleman or an aristocrat was the people. That was what the original meaning of the people was. Everybody that was not an aristocrat or nobleman. Now, if you were to interview people, do you think some of them would say, well, I didn't know that. That's news to me. That's a new idea. So if we now have a constitution that starts with we the people, and they suddenly go, oh my goodness, this is a different type of game than being one of the masses and not one of the special people. So as one example, the people being cleared up to being, when you say the people, it's different if you just say people. When you put the word the in front and say the people, it means all the people or most of the people in complete agreement, speaking as one voice. So I would say if people have an inkling that there might be some meaning to the word that are used to describe the purposes that they didn't know existed, and that's why people can say it's a different preamble, is their ideas what it was comes to what was originally intended, and 6 purposes are now clear to them, and thus they have solutions brought to the table instead of problems that they're aware of around them. Maybe they're numb to them, but now solutions start to roll because they understand what the purposes are.
All right, Christopher, I'm going to, as we go towards the tail end of the episode, I'm going to tee you up for an objection, right? And by the way, this is usually objections I receive via email, comments on past episodes. It just happens to be that you were on the show here back a few months ago, so was able to actually curate some different responses and objections in that case. So one of the objections I got, and I think it's actually a very good objection, and I want to hear your overcoming of this objection, and that is, listen, Christopher, I love this. I love the fact that you're outlining the preamble using the language of the time and helping translate it for today. I love that you're helping make this make sense to your average person. But, and here's the objection, what will it accomplish? And here's the premise to that. We have 400 or 300 years basically of the American experiment. And with that, a constitution, and with that, the preamble that is to the Constitution and the amendments of the Bill of Rights and so on and so forth. And yet, despite people at that time speaking the language to where we are today, that piece of paper has been so violated, so completely overstepped, so just completely ignored that even if we had a populace understand the importance and the context of the document as it was written at the time that it was written, that even still, that wouldn't make a difference today because we've seen how big the government has gotten. We've seen how overreaching the government has gotten. We see how tyrannical the government has gotten, that despite a populace becoming aware and understanding that there's still no way for them to actually, and pardon the expression, fight back, to stand up and do something about it. So that's the objection, Christopher. I'll let you go ahead and respond in full.
Okay, it's a great objection, and I can see the best way to overcome it is to go back to one point. The whole objective of making the guide was so that people could get results. And it's the results that we're getting 100% of the time when people honestly go through the guide, follow the directions for it, read the preamble, understand every word as it was originally meant, then read it again. We get results like this. And Brian, I honestly think this will give you an example of what's the point, how will it do anything, how will it help solve a problem? But to me, this is a problem solver on steroids. This person says, I've been living in the United States since 1988, and never wanted to become an American citizen. And suddenly, studying the preamble, I realized why that is, and that it has nothing to do with America. It has to do with what people have made out of America. So another side effect of reading this, and he's talking about doing the guide, is that I, for the first time, want to become an American, not the shabby substitute that's been created, but the original idea that you are promulgating and revitalizing. I must confess that while I had glanced at the Constitution a few times and even reading parts of it, it never became real. America's success in becoming the most powerful and free nation on earth was started with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. I believe there's a lot of power in what you're doing. You're revitalizing a huge arsenal of failed purposes of people who want to live a good life and agree with their fellows and be secure and friendly and able to defend themselves. I want to help on this project. Right there.
There you go. All right. Well, how about this, Christopher? I know we're already hard pressed for time, so we like to do our little final thoughts to the audience. I think, from an overview standpoint, my final thoughts are pretty self-evident, and that is, we talk about here in the show meeting people where they're at on the issues they care about, and it really comes down to understanding language, how to not just take what you've read, what you've learned, and then just regurgitate it, but to specifically address the problems, the pain points of the audience, the people you are actually speaking to at that moment. It's so important to get out of your own, my ideas are the best and my ism is the best. And just more people need to hear about it. No, that's well and good, but you actually have to be able to bring this to an audience that is not already aware of your product or service, or in this case, a solution that just happens to be hundreds of years old. Meet people where they're at on the issues they care about in the language they are familiar with. That's my final thoughts for today. Christopher, what do you have for us on your end?
What I have to say is that I've observed time and again is that problems resolved when terms are fully cleared up and understood. And this may not well be noticed until you actually do it. What is most pronounced is when these words deal with purposes, specifically the 6 purposes on the US Constitution. Results occur because people understand their rights much better and know more about what they can do about it. Solutions come to the table. It's a step on the road to winning any arguments in politics and having people come together and unite. Our goal is to get hundreds of millions of Americans to understand this one sentence so they have a clear view of the preamble of the United States Constitution and know what its 6 purposes mean and how to use them.
Christopher Nesbitt from Citizen Academy US. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Where can folks go ahead and grab their own copy of a guide, yes, to complete understanding of the preamble of the U.S. Constitution?
All they need to do is go to www.citizensacademyus, citizensacademy.us, and they'll see the guide right there, or they can order a copy, soft or hard copy.
Perfect. And how about this, folks? We'll make it super easy for you. Links all in the show notes. If you got some value from today's conversation with Christopher Nesbitt from Citizens Academy US, please do me a favor. Head down below into the show notes. Let us know your thoughts. Not show notes, the comments, that is. Let us know your thoughts. Do you agree that this is definitely an area we need to get people more well-versed, or do you think this is just a pipe dream? We're spinning ourselves in a circle on a Ferris wheel. We want to hear all about it, so let us know down below. But if you did enjoy the episode, please go ahead and give it a share. When you do, please tag yours truly at B Nichols Liberty, both on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever it is you consume your social medias. And for the actual content of the Brian Nichols Show, you can share us on your favorite podcasting app or video platform, YouTube, Rumble. We're on Facebook, Twitter, for the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, wherever it is you consume your podcast content. Just do me a favor, hit subscribe, hit that little notification bell so you don't miss a single time we go live. And also, if you're joining us on the podcast version of the show, make sure you hit download all unplayed episodes, because that is the only place outside of our website where you can find the entire archives of the Brian Nichols Show in all 850 plus episodes. Because yeah, we've had some battles here on the Brian Nichols Show with the big tech overlords who don't like some of our content and coverage from the 2020 to 2024 insanity of COVID. So we had to remove some videos. And of course, we want to make sure we can still reach you folks on YouTube. So if you want to check all those classic episodes where we talked about some controversial issues, head over to the archives there at briannicholsshow.com, or like I said, download all unplayed episodes on your favorite podcast catcher. Christopher, I have one last word, and that is to please support the folks who support us, and that is our phenomenal sponsors. So our good friends over at Cardio Miracle, who are our amazing studio sponsors. We have our good friends at Amp America, the wellness company, Ebel's CBD, Liquid Freedom, Energy Tea, and more. Please go ahead and support them, because they're the ones who support us and keep the lights on here at the Brian Nichols Show. Christopher, any last words for the audience as you wrap things up today?
I think we did it really well, Brian. Thank you so much. I appreciate being on the show, and I wish you a great day.
Likewise, Christopher, thank you for joining us. And folks, again, please go ahead, give today's episode a share. When you do, tag yours truly at B. Nichols Liberty. But with that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on the Brian Nichols Show for Christopher Nesbitt from Citizens Academy US. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.